Great. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining this webinar today. I was going to say that we probably wouldn't take the full hour, and we still probably won't take a full hour. But yeah, so my name is Preston Witt. I'm the Anti-Corruption Advisor and Research Coordinator for Targeting Natural Resource Corruption, TNRC. I sit in WWF US and work with a lot of our colleagues around different offices in the WWF network, like Jose, whom you will hear from shortly. Just a few seconds, because I would get in trouble if I didn't, on what TNRC is. So we're a consortium of several different organizations right now. As we're ending the program, coming into our last months, it's WWF, Traffic, and the Basel Institute on Governance, as well as some collaborations with Transparency International. But our main goal is building knowledge on the risks that corruption poses to conservation and how to reduce those risks. So over the past 5 years of the program toward that goal, we've generated more than 100 different resources, guides, tools, including the results chains that we'll be focusing on today. We have several in-country activities and pilots, including Jose's. And we've also done quite a few learning events and activities like this one. The 6 topic areas that we focus on are here on the screen. All of our resources and events can fall kind of into at least one of these buckets. So just to run through these, law enforcement and criminal justice. So we look both at the risks that corruption can pose for law enforcement-based approaches to conservation, sort of like rangers in protected areas, as well as more sort of law enforcement and criminal justice approaches specifically to anti-corruption. I'll come back to that dichotomy a little bit later on. Related to law enforcement and criminal justice, we also have a big focus, especially from our collaboration with the Basel Institute, on illicit financial flows. So the ways that environmental criminals profit for their crimes, and how those of us in opposition to those crimes can follow that money, interrupt those networks, in some cases reclaim those assets, and therefore kind of really get at the people who are profiting from crimes, not necessarily sort of the lower level frontline folks who are all too often the easier focus, especially for like law enforcement type approaches. We look at supply chains, so fish, forest, legal supply chains, and the ways that corruption can be used to launder illicit products like illegally caught fish into licit supply chains. Jose's presentation will talk more about that. But we also, especially through our collaboration with Traffic, look at like the fully illicit supply chains for illegal wildlife products like rhino horn. Open governance, kind of unsurprising, since so many of the anti-corruption approaches rely on transparency, accountability, and civic participation. Similarly, from that kind of solution or approach to anti-corruption perspective, social norms and behavior change. So how to leverage behavioral science to reduce corrupt behaviors, change the incentives that are allowing those corrupt behaviors to occur. And then finally, but certainly not least, communities and inclusion. So this was my main topic area of focus, and kind of includes everything from benefit sharing and equitable revenue sharing for nature-based solutions and other sort of innovative conservation mechanisms like that, as well as community-focused sort of softer power approaches to anti-corruption. And so so I mentioned all the tools and guides that we've produced. We also produced 4 model results chains adapted from the Conservation Action and Measures Library. I will go through 2 in just a second, law enforcement and social norms and behavior change, just to sort of demonstrate what we did. Then we'll turn it over to Jose for his presentation on his activity that they did as part of TNRC, and then and their specific theory of change. And then I'll turn it back because the WWF Peru activity specifically informed our traceability and market-based incentives results chains. So when I'll go through those after Jose presents, so I can show some of those specific connections. The goal being sort of twofold. One, we're proud of these. We want to share them and show kind of one of the many ways that the tools of the Conservation Measure Partnership can be adapted to sort of specific mandates like ours, which is anti-corruption. But we also, by actually sort of walking through each of these, are hoping that depending on which one is most relevant to your work, you'll be able to see specific entry points for anti-corruption in your more sort of day-to-day conservation work. So I'm going to stop sharing. Okay. Can everyone see the results chain here?
Yes, got it.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
Excellent. So as I mentioned, we adapted these from standard results chains in the Conservation Action and Measures Library. We are working with Foundations of Success to build these in as tools into CAML. So the law enforcement, integrating anti-corruption into law enforcement approaches results chain that you see here, we adapted from the high-level generic wildlife trade law enforcement theory of change. And in some cases simplified, but primarily all we did was add in some anti-corruption specifics, and that's indicated by red text here. So just as some examples as I walk through, of course, from the sort of conservation standards perspective, important to always begin with sort of a situation analysis. So here we included some detailed information about applying a corruption lens when you're doing that sort of initial situation analysis, and included some links to useful resources, both those that TNRC has produced, as well as some resources from other important external groups like URSA in the case of rangers. So once you understand the situation and the specific capacities that need to be enhanced, then you can actually begin that capacity building. And again, here, including some information about the specific soft skills that might be important or are important from taking that anti-corruption perspective on law enforcement. Then including some resources here about making sure that, this goes back to that dichotomy I mentioned, that for any sort of justice system or law enforcement approach, making sure that corruption does not undermine the courts, does not otherwise weaken the legal process, make evidence disappear. And there, with those capacities enhanced and the legal process functioning well, leading to the arrest of some of those larger scale traffickers and prosecutions, and ideally recovery of assets. These appear, this is not necessarily just from a corruption perspective, but even though they are all unread, but of course important in any law enforcement approach that there are efforts to shift that broader enabling environment, work on inclusive conservation to ensure that human rights are respected and protected as part of law enforcement. Some connections to those different illicit financial flows resources that I mentioned for following the money, engaging with banks and other financial institutions, and then some social norms and behavior change to reduce the tolerance of corruption. I will actually move to that one next. Okay. So this one, social norms and behavior change for anti-corruption, we adapted from the outreach and communications standard action. Again, specifically at the beginning, looking at some different analyses and understanding of the situation that needs to occur, and some specific concepts to bear in mind, both from the anti-corruption perspective, but also from the communications perspective. So the importance, for example, of understanding the drivers and motivators of corrupt behavior. Are the corrupt practices socially accepted or expected? Understanding that sort of system. And then from the communications perspective, developing your message, pre-testing it, and especially through our work with traffic, including a lot of behavior change, sort of behavioral science information in here, including some rather counterintuitive pieces of advice regarding anti-corruption communications. So as an alternative, or at least in addition to kind of more naming and shaming approaches, there's some really interesting evidence about the power of positive recognition. So lifting up and recognizing those who are behaving ethically, as well as just the almost universal failure of awareness raising about corrupt activity, because almost always that either just tells people information that they already knew, therefore just isn't a relevant piece of communications for them, or actually backfires by reinforcing this sort of expectation that everyone's corrupt. And so if you think everyone's corrupt, you're less motivated to actually take any action to reduce that corruption. again, making sure that the conditions are in place to facilitate the behavior change that that your message is trying to promote, including efforts to reduce those barriers, change those motivators and drivers that you previously identified, and being sure to recognize that, especially in situations where corruption is a social norm, going against that social norm will lead to, or could lead to, personal costs. And so it's both, it's important from both an ethical perspective of the folks that you're working with, but also from an effectiveness perspective to make sure that you're including efforts to overcome those costs or limit them, provide alternative pathways. So those are two of the four. Like I said, I'm gonna turn it over to get out of the kind of high level theory. I'm gonna turn it over to Jose for a bit to discuss what they actually did. And then when Jose's done and has showed us their specific theory of change, I'll go back to the other two results change that we prepared and show how we informed those based off of the activities like Jose's. Jose, do you want me to share your presentation?
Yo puedo compartir. I can share.
Yes, and Jose's going to present in Spanish. So if you don't want to hear him in Spanish, I think just clicking on the interpretation link at the bottom and then selecting English, I think that will give you Spanish to English translation. Y José, ¿puedes compartir o necesitas permisión?
Yeah. Well, hello everyone. But I can share my screen. I need the permit.
I believe Bilingual just made you a co-host just a second ago.
Yeah, perfect. Bueno, buenos días con
Well,
todos.
good morning. Would you all thank you for the invitation. I'm going to talk about our project. It has been supported by TNRC. It's called Reducing Corruption in Small-Scale Fisheries Through Digital Services. First of all, to put things in context about the fishing context in Peru. Well, in Peru, there are more than 40,000 fishermen, more than 15,000 vessels. However, more than 50% are illegal or informal because they don't have the required documents to carry out that activity. But there is a large number of vessels that are in process to be formal. However, there is a lot of informality in the sector, and many of the procedures are based in paper, and this allows for certain situations to happen. So you might have some cases of corruption. So the idea of this project was to attack these procedures in paper, to be able to digitalize them and reduce or mitigate in some manner the possible cases of corruption in the fishing supply chain. So in the first stage was to carry out a diagnosis of the productive chain, to understand which are the actors in this value chain, what is generated in terms of information, how information is transmitted or passed from one actor to the other, and what are the procedures, fishery documents, which actors, before which authorities, what type of documents, to see how could we digitalize all these procedures or attack the biggest bottleneck to start with this process and to digitalize it. we saw a tool that it's called TrazApp as a possible tool to be able to go from a physical phase to a digital phase, and so that everything can be digitalized. This is what TrazApp started. It's an electronic app which has different users. Just as the productive chain, you've got actors that are in this chain participating. There are users for each one of the actors. There's a user for the person who means the vessel owner, another one for the intermediary, another one for the fishermen, other is for the people at port. So just to know how the flow of information is managed through this this app. Well, the vessel owner in Peru, we have a process that every single vessel needs to that wants to go fish needs to go through, and they have to inform everybody that this vessel wants to go and fish. But this procedure is a physical one. It's an in-person that each vessel owner needs to go to an office, turn in all the information together with all the information from the crew members so that they can go out and work. And we worked in this app so that everything is in an app, so that they can request the Navy, so that the Navy can actually go to the database and say, yes, you filled in all the information, you turned it in, and now you have the authorization to go fish. So the person in charge will check all the information and say, what's the vessel, from what port to what port, on which dates, and then it gets sent to the Navy, to the DCAPI, and you send all the information to them. And the Navy receives all the information and automatically evaluates and sees if the vessel has got all the necessary documentation and if all the crew members have got an ID to call them fishermen. No? And with that, we get an authorization of the Navy saying that we can just leave port. Then this user tends to record information of the capture, of the catch, of the different arts of fishing, any type of information, but all of this is shared with the IMAPE, the Peruvian Research Center, so that they can do some more research. When the vessel is about to reach the port, this app or this user finalizes the trip, and the owner gets a message saying that the vessel is reaching the port. They weigh everything, and then they sell it to an intermediary that takes it to either a business or sells it to the people interested in the product. And then after that, they can do all the paperwork, they can sell. There's also the registration or the possibility of registering a vessel, the destination where they come from. And this information is shared with the authorities that then share it at the same time with the authorities from the region. And we are now we're currently working with two different ports, with two different regional, two different regions, so that they both know and have the necessary information. We're implementing this in the coastline. And what I mentioned initially about what we worked together with the Navy, with the Peruvian Navy, which is the authority in charge to allow this this type of fishing trips, it has been accepted officially by the authority, by the fishing authority. This was a symbolic celebration, and this is the moment in which we are giving them the app so that they can start using. And this is the DCAPI with the information, with with information of the fishing company, and they can request the information digitally. At the beginning, this was about personal fishing, and or small scale. But now everybody can use it, even if it's large scale or small scale. And you have all the information required by the Navy Authority. The next steps, and we are working on it, this is to be able to digitalize all the certificates, the certificates of origin. These are issued by the regional governments in Peru, meaning when a vessel wants to sell the products to a processing plant, they have the fisherman or the intermediary needs to request a certificate of origin so that they can sell it to the plant, because the processing plant can only accept the purchasing of this sale if it comes with such certificate with the legal stamps from the region. It is something physical, but we are working with the regional government of Piura so that we can digitalize it, so that we can put it here, so the person who wants to sell, rather than having to go to an actual physical address or an office of the regional government, can do so from his or her phone in a much faster and efficient manner. And when a processing plant wants to export their products to the EU or Japan, there is a catch certificate that the plant requested from the regional government so they can export their product. And we are working on that so that they can request that from a digital platform, avoiding all the red tape and making it much, much simpler. And well, part of this is to implement it, to test it on the field, to carry out workshops with the different actors from the productive chain, whom are going to be able to request all of these certificates and paperwork through the app, so that it is useful for them and improving the tool. And before going to the theory of change or management of change, this digital process was born, or actually before, let me comment or mention on the actual results of the application as such. The app has been requesting more than 10,000 trips. It's only been a couple of months since we generated, and about 500 vessels that have been using it. More than 100,000 tons in different are being taken to different ports. How everything has been evolving on a monthly basis per region. This is through different ports and in the coastline. And before giving the mic to or the floor to Preston, I'd like to mention something else. In order to be able to digitalize all of these procedures, we carry out a study on the vulnerabilities that happen in the process to be able to get the different documents needed by the Navy. We identified many vulnerabilities and possible cases of corruption. In many cases, some authorities would request certain documents, in other ones, more documents. There was no standard of documents that needed to be presented. And given that we were requesting different documents, there were some bribes happening to avoid having to turn in certain documents. The offices were not always open, closed in certain situations, closed in certain dates, which would mean that the fishermen would have to go to other offices that would not be as close to them as they would prefer. Then, for example, they would have a captaincy and people would have one document from one captaincy, another document from another captaincy, and there was no way of checking if either document was original or not, because there was nothing digital. So we started digitalizing all these documents so that it could be a very useful tool for both the authority and the user, so that they could simplify all the different documents and the bureaucracy. I don't know if you want to talk about the theory of change. Yes, thank you, Jose.
Sure. So, I'll go through it in a I'll go through in a bit more detail on the model results change that we produced. But just wanted to show here, and this of course sort of evolved, as Jose mentioned. There were various phases of our work with WWF Peru, and so this is the final theory of change here, and hopefully you can see reflected the different steps that Jose spoke about. So understanding the needs of both. They repeatedly put it a really interesting way, understanding the needs of both the regulators and the regulated, discussing those results and identifying policy improvements that are sort of win-wins, so things that get better outcomes for the regulators and also make things better for the regulated, the fishers in this case. Efforts to deploy and test the app, trainings so that folks can properly use the app, and together with those broader improvements, increasing the formality in the sector, which reduces corruption, in this case reduced the instances where fishers were needing to make informal payments for the services that TrazApp digitized, and some other benefits in terms of additional data availability for like fisheries management. Before we leave from the specific and possibly more interesting, if there were any questions for Jose about their work, please feel free to ask those. Great. Well, Jose's not leaving, so you can chat if you chat him if you do have specific questions. I'm going to take over the screen share again. No. Okay, are you seeing the correct screen?
No, we're seeing presentation mode, or the opposite of presentation mode. Presenter mode. Yep, now we got it. Perfect.
Great. Excellent. So, so this is the one of the two results change that we created based on the different activities, including Jose's. So this was kind of this particular one, the transparency and accountability in market-based incentives, is sort of an application of those open governance principles to supply chains. So because it's in PowerPoint, of course, the different pop-ups won't show, but the situation analysis at the beginning, of course, corresponding to that study that Jose mentioned about understanding the needs of the stakeholders. The sort of dual needs of raising awareness of the policies and sending market signals through the value chain, which from WWF Peru involved that sort of increasing the formality of the sector, as well as ensuring integrity in that value chain through transparency and accountability. So this is where, in the case of fisheries, traceability comes in, and in the case of WWF Peru, that that application of technology for traceability. And then, as I briefly mentioned, one of the outcomes of the WWF Peru was that generation of additional and more accurate information for decision making, of course, corresponding to the better product and management practices standard action, which combined with the sustainable livelihood interventions and the technology for traceability interventions lead to your better outcomes for people and planet. WWF Peru's activities also informed our specific traceability model results chain. So similarly adapted from 5.3, the market-based incentives generic theory of change in CAMEL, but this time specifically focusing on on traceability. So of course the pop-up isn't here, but making sure that the system is set up from the beginning to be adequate, that there aren't gaps, that the systems connect, extend all the way to the point of harvest, and making sure that corruption doesn't prevent any of those things from happening. Again, understanding through the collaboration with the regulators and the regulated where there are opportunities for reform, and so those policies and those regulations being reformed, along with capacity building to use, in this case, a technological approach. And that technology being one of the elements that support enforcement and monitoring of that adequate traceability system, making sure that the corruption does not undermine that system. And like I said at the beginning, preventing, especially in the case of traceability, preventing illegally caught fish or fish that are a different species or are too small or otherwise don't comply with the fishing regulations from getting kind of laundered into the official legal fish supply chains. Great. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize there was going to be, that was surprising. Didn't realize there were going to be sound effects. Yeah, are there any questions? Or yeah, points of discussion?
I guess one question I would have, Preston, is you were talking about highlighting good behavior and kind of lifting good behavior up as opposed to shaming. I was wondering if you had any examples of how that's worked in the past.
Fortunate, because you picked one that I do remember, which you very easily could have picked something that I didn't remember doing. So this, a lot of that work is coming from, I forget what the acronym stands for, but it's ACE. I think global integrity is part of it. If you go to the social norms and behavior change results chain or the thematic page on TNRC, it does link to some of their work. But I believe it was in Uganda and involved, I'm definitely oversimplifying, but basically, especially in the sort of park system, there was kind of seen as a rent-seeking space, and so you were expected, if you had any sort of role in that system, you were expected to leverage that role for your community's benefit. So we would recognize that as corruption. I think it was sort of normalized as like that was just how you brought these benefits to your community. And so the intervention there was really focused on to kind of break those social norms, highlight and promote those parks, those communities that weren't doing that were following a very high ethical standard. And yeah, the logic basically being a tourist picking from two different parks. If one is just a park and the other one is a park that has a little like recognized as the 2019 like at most ethical, etc., then you're creating a positive incentive that can kind of replace some of those rents that that would potentially be lost. Again, definitely oversimplifying, perhaps even incorrectly remembering that project. But yeah, it was pretty unique in terms of taking that positive recognition approach to an anti-corruption approach for conservation.
Thank you.
Just to follow on from that example, did you find that it worked, that sort of promotion of those ethical parks? Did you have data to prove that it was a success?
I think they did. I haven't checked on it super recently. I think the last time I sort of looked at their project page was 3 or 4 months ago. But I know that they are trying to sort of generate that evidence. And from what I do remember, it did seem to be working.
Brilliant. Just on a separate note, it's really exciting to know that these theories of change will be available on Camel for others to use and adapt. And yeah, just to say it's awesome work, and it's really exciting that you are making your resources so accessible. So thank you.
Thanks. Yes, thank you. I will say it was a lot less work than it could have been, thanks to the resources. So kind of a great sort of positive feedback loop here of by having some of these starting points at a general level, it then lets projects like mine that, like I said, have a more specific remit, come in, add a little additional information, make some tweaks, and then now there's a new, more specific resource or set of resources. But also hopefully, I would imagine most of the TNRC audience is already very familiar with CMP, but we do also hope that will kind of drive more traffic your way as well.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I wanted to reiterate what Claire said. It's really exciting to see these theories of change. And are they accessible on the TNRC website, or is it in the future they will be accessible through Camel?
They will be accessible through Camel. I believe I'm working with Varsha, I believe, to make that happen. Then they will be, we will also post them on, or we're waiting for them to be available there to then create their little landing pages on the TNRC Knowledge Hub, which will direct folks to the pages in Marathi Share.
Cool. Very cool.
Great.
I had another question, and I'm not all the way sure how to pitch it. Maybe, y es para José. ¿Puedo hablar en español si eso ayuda, o puedo usar?
I can speak in English if that is easier for you to understand, or I can use the interpreter. When I think about corruption, as we all know, everything is very complicated, quite foggy. It's very difficult to know where do you go in, right? How to get in, and to develop an app makes me extremely happy, because you can see that it's a concrete step. Yes, we can do this, and we can digitalize this. Digitalize things that before were on paper, now are not, and it is such a concrete manner of showing progress. But I'm wondering, what is the effect of digitalizing all of these things if you do not have all these other changes in society that to go hand in hand with? Does it still have a positive result? I think it does, but I would love to know if you have seen a positive effect, some sort of change that doesn't depend on all the other changes that need to be made. Yes, thank you, Jenny. Just to mention this, the app was created before for a couple of reasons mainly. One, that in Peru there was a lot of informality in the fishery sector, and the government proposed different initiatives. Right, one of the requirements was that the fisheries would have a system in which they could show what they were catching. Right, and the other one was that with the fishermen that we were working with, the product is usually exported to the US market, the European market, and there are certain demands, right? So we built this app with those actors. However, the potential is that it could be able to be used by other users, that it could be used by the fisheries, the fishermen, and that we were taking advantage of all this mass of users to have an alternative rather than the physical manner of the way of doing things.
There are two different initiatives. In digital format, it's continue, but sorry, in physical format it's continue, but in digital format it's an alternative to make different procedures. So, and the other thing is we work with a different fishers. Each community have a person that most is a daughter from the fisher of community or son, and this is the person responsible to train to the fishers. So the idea is if the fisher has a consult, go to this person in field to respond these different issues. So they don't go from us. So only all the knowledge is still in the community.
I just add two things from kind of a higher level or comparative perspective. I think exactly what Jose was just saying is, I think, evidence of one of the key success factors being, although we are just focusing on this specific technology, and it does only address certain steps of the process, like it is integrated in the years of work and existing projects that WWF Peru has. I think that was a really big benefit. The trust of both the fishers and the Navy, I think is evidence of that. And the other thing I would say, because you're absolutely right, Jenny, in terms of the need to address all of these other elements. But even this relatively smaller step, I think, was successful for, I would say, probably the primary reason being that it solved a key problem that people felt in their day-to-day lives. So it wasn't one of these more esoteric good governance-y type approaches, as much as it was like, hey, you have to spend a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of gas to do this process on paper. So much so that we know that like a lot of you just don't do it because it's cheaper just to pay a bribe to get out of it. We're going to do this. It makes that whole process easier, reduces those opportunities for bribes, and also like it's one of those, it's a win-win. But I think that responding to a concrete sort of quotidian in the sense of like, yeah, this is something I have to deal with day to day, I think was key to its success.
Preston, I don't want to interrupt kind of the flow of the question section, but I do remember you had a survey you were interested in having attendees fill out. So bilingual, if you have that survey accessible, if you could please activate it. I've also created a similar survey on file and can pop the link in the chat if that would be easier.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah, we lost Renu. Maybe I don't know, Claire, if you want to also complete the survey, that way it just doesn't. I don't want it to pop up with like Ginny's like, I didn't learn anything. This was not useful. You know, not that I think that's what her answer is going to be, but
Yeah,
just to
I'm
give a
sure
little
it
bit
would be.
yeah.
But as we're waiting, I just want to thank both of you, Preston and Jose, for presenting today. I thought this was a really fantastic presentation. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. Can you see the poll? I think I might have launched it.
I can see the poll.
Okay, cool. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Thank you both. Yeah, I'm working with a client on trying to build a lot of stuff for a transparency project that also looks at biodiversity conservation. So it's good to see what other people are thinking and constructing around that topic. And I'm pumped that these resources are going to get integrated and are like together with what CMP is doing.
Great. Well, thank you for attending. Excellent. Okay, so only a few minutes overtime. With such a late start, I think that's pretty good. Awesome. Well, thank you, and thanks Ryan and Claire and bilingual. Or gracias, Jose.